People often justify violent behavior, such as aggression and self-harm, by saying "I was angry," as if anger was the trigger that motivated them to become violent. So, should we be afraid of anger? And what is exactly anger?
Well, we'd say that anger is the key emotion. And anger is different from other negative emotions because it leads to action. That's one of the things that bothers us, I guess, about both good and bad ways, that you can get good and bad actions out of anger. But it's a basic physiological state. You can't differentiate different kinds of anger, really. It's something that has physiological consequences. It's a form of arousal, sweaty palms, racing heart, and it also has some cognitive consequences, which is less careful processing of information, with the idea that that helps us take action. So unlike other kinds of negative emotions like fear or anxiety that can lead to avoidance, anger is an action-oriented emotion. That's why we're talking about it, because it leads to all kinds of consequences. I mean, people feel good, actually, when the enemy is hurt. I mean, this is it. You know, it's an unfortunate, but anger, strangely, is a positive emotion. You take action, you feel good.
People often forget that anger can lead to positive outcomes. Social movements like the civil rights movement would not have existed without anger mobilizing their supporters. So, is there a good anger and a bad anger? And if so, how do we distinguish between the two?
So I'd say, I mean, we can start with interpersonal, that's not political, but two guys in a bar, one insults the other, gets angry with the effects of alcohol, there's less regulation of that emotion. So sometimes we down-regulate. Even in all situations, we can say it's not good to feel anger. And I think women do more of that than men do. It's unacceptable in many circumstances for women to express anger. But if it's, let's say you've had a few drinks, this seems wrong, and you don't think very much and you strike out, we consider that to be bad behavior, generally. So that's an interpersonal, two people, couples do it all the time. It can be verbal aggression, it can be physical aggression. But politics is more complicated. Typically, if I'm upset with what the other political party has done, I can't just go and punch the Prime Minister or the leader of the opposition. It's not open to me. So then the question is, how much time do I have to think about what kind of action I would take? Who am I surrounded by? What kind of social networks? What do they suggest is an appropriate way to take action? I may sustain it. I may continue to be angry at the other political party, and that's a constant. But if my party is telling me, or my friends are telling me, you know, the best way to handle this is to go vote them out of office, then we might consider that to be a democratically positive form of anger. Or I decide to go and work for the candidate because I'm so mad at the other side. That fuels political participation. If, however, you're surrounded by a group of people who say the best way to deal with this injustice is maybe outside the political system, or we're going to go rogue, a group of us are going to go and blow something up, or we're going to release, let's say, lab animals because we're upset about the way they're treated in a university lab. Then we start engaging in criminal behavior, and I think we would consensually say that some of this activity is clearly bad. So it isn't the immediate experience of anger, it's what happens to it. It is leading, if you don't down-regulate, if you maintain it, and it's maintained, it begs for action. The question is, how is that action decided upon? And I think that will depend on your context, kind of political groups, your belief system, your understanding of society, what kind of access you have to formal channels of power. I think being disenfranchised, feeling outside that system, could encourage things that we might consider to be bad consequences of anger. Although sometimes they're positive. I mean, if we think of the ANC in South Africa and Nelson Mandela, it was a violent organization. In hindsight, people may say that was maybe action that was considered bad by some, good by others. So this comes back to the situation or the networks that you're embedded in, right? It's got to do with what you're hearing about socially acceptable in your group ways of channeling this anger. But if you're in a group that's facilitating this, or you hear, and this gets us into politics again, if you're hearing political leaders tacitly, implicitly encouraging violent action, that's a very strong signal that it's acceptable. And I think a lot of this is about norms, our social norms that can prevent us from taking the kinds of negative actions that we're thinking of, or facilitate those.
Jordan Peterson says that malevolent, ignorant, and bitter language, which is often expression of anger in social media, can be part of healthy debates when there is real disagreement between people.
And the thing is, if you talk, other people will correct you. That's the thing. And that's thinking. So if you get up and you have something to say, and you say it stupidly, because of course you will, because what do you know, then other people will tell you where you're wrong. And then you can learn, right? And then everybody can think. And so what that also means is that to be free to speak, even to tell the truth, means you have to be free to be stupid and ignorant and malevolent and bitter.
I don't buy that. I think the evidence is that it escalates. So what it's doing is removing the normative pressure to not say these things. It encourages other people to say them, and I think it escalates. So do we have evidence for that? It's hard to say, but we know that, for example, tweets get retweeted if they have highly emotional content. So if there is, if I'm in a network, and again, this is back to whatever kind of network I'm in, if I'm in a network and somebody says something that we consider to be vile, other people send it around and it's circulated, it takes some brakes off further expression. These people aren't arguing with each other, they're sharing like-minded messages, and they're basically sending a signal that we are a group of people who are really angry. I see that as ramping it up. It's a social reinforcement of the emotion. And we do know from studying groups of people that people in these kinds of networks want to show that they belong to the group by expressing these feelings. So it's gaining greater acceptance. The more vitriolic I become, the better I am as a member of this 8chan network, right? Now I'm celebrated. I'm someone who's really saying ghastly things, and so I become the perfect example of what an 8chaner is. You know, now I'm applauded by everybody, and so my social status increases in the group. So I think that that dynamic is a bad one. It isn't people arguing with each other. That is not what's happening, right? I mean, we'll leave Jordan Peterson aside, but you know, that is not what's going on in these networks. People are communicating. I think they convey emotional expressions and messages to show each other we're part of this together, and we're coordinating our emotional state, which means that we're a stronger group and that we are even less exposed to any condemnation of these feelings. So I think it's a bad dynamic.